March 18, 1943. Over the skies of Bremen, Germany, Luftwaffe Hauptmann Klaus Müller banked his Messerschmitt Bf-109G, forced sharply to the right, scanning the horizon for the approaching American bomber formation. A light dusting of snow drifted through the frigid air at 25,000 feet as he tightened his oxygen mask and prepared for the coming interception. In the cockpit of his fighter, Müller smiled confidently. He had already claimed 7 Allied aircraft, and these lumbering American bombers would surely add to his growing list of victories. But what he believed would be another routine day of hunting would soon transform into the most terrifying encounter of his distinguished combat career. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how America's industrial might manifested itself in the air war over Europe, and how one elite German fighter pilot came face to face with the overwhelming firepower that would ultimately seal the fate of the Luftwaffe. Hauptmann Klaus Müller had joined the Luftwaffe in 1939, just before the outbreak of the war. At 27 years old, he was considered a veteran among the increasingly young pilots of Jagdgeschwader 1 OSA. His personal logbook recorded 632 combat hours, and his 7 confirmed kills included 3 British Spitfires, 2 Soviet Yak-1s, and 2 American P-47 Thunderbolts. The Iron Cross Second Class adorned his uniform, and his superiors had recently recommended him for the First Class decoration. That frigid morning, Müller led a swarm of 4 Bf-109s, part of the 3rd Staffel of JG-1. His wingmen included Lieutenant Werner Schmidt, a promising young pilot with 3 kills, Unteroffizier Hans Gruber, with just 1 kill to his credit, and Feldwebel Otto Wagner, who had joined the unit only 2 weeks earlier and was flying his 3rd combat mission. The pilots had been briefed that morning at 0500 hours. Intelligence had reported a large formation of American B-17 flying fortresses, escorted by P-47 Thunderbolts, likely targeting the submarine pens and shipyards at Bremen. Major Walter Osaw, the Geschwader Commodore, had issued clear orders: disrupt the bomber formation before they reach their targets. Remember, Osaw had told them during briefing, attack from above and the front. Avoid their tail gunners at all costs. One pass, then away. We cannot afford to lose experienced pilots. In his diary the night before, Müller had written, "Tomorrow we will show these Americans that their so-called flying fortresses are not impregnable. Our new G-4 models have the firepower to bring down any bomber. It's only a matter of pilot skill, and in this, we Luftwaffe pilots have the clear advantage." Meanwhile, 380 miles to the west, the American bomber crews were already airborne. The 91st Bomb Group, part of the 8th Air Force's growing bomber force, had departed from their base at Bassingbourn, England at 0415 hours. Among them was the B-17F Carolina Queen, piloted by Major Robert Taylor of Charlotte, North Carolina. Taylor, 30, had been a commercial pilot for Eastern Airlines before the war. Now he commanded a crew of 9 men, many of whom were on their 7th mission together. Their B-17F had been delivered just 3 months earlier, one of the thousands rolling off Boeing's production lines. The aircraft boasted 13.50 caliber Browning machine guns, a flying arsenal with nearly 6,000 rounds of ammunition. In the waist gunner position stood Staff Sergeant Mike Donovan, a former steelworker from Pittsburgh. His hands gripped the cold metal of his .50 caliber Browning, which could fire 850 rounds per minute. The right waist position was manned by Sergeant James Wilson, who had been a hunting guide in Montana before enlisting. The ball turret, a cramped sphere hanging beneath the bomber's belly, contained Corporal David Cohen, a slight young man from Brooklyn who had volunteered specifically for this position, despite its reputation as the most dangerous spot in the aircraft. The mission briefing had warned of heavy fighter opposition. Lieutenant Colonel Basil Lockhart, the group operations officer, had emphasized the importance of maintaining tight formation. "Your best defense is staying together," he had told them. "Every gun in the formation creates an interlocking field of fire. Stray from the formation, and you're as good as shot down." By 0730 hours, the full strike force had assembled over the North Sea, 76 B-17s in 4 combat boxes, escorted by 53 P-47 Thunderbolts. The American pilots knew their escort would have to turn back before reaching Bremen due to fuel limitations, leaving the bombers to fend for themselves over the target. In his pilot's log, Taylor had noted, "The new German fighters are faster than anything we've seen before. Our only advantage is our defensive firepower. Each B-17 carries more machine guns than an entire infantry platoon. Let them come close enough, and they'll understand why they call us flying fortresses." The striking power of this formation was staggering. The combined might of the B-17 force carried approximately 988.50 caliber machine guns and over 570,000 rounds of ammunition. Together, they could theoretically deliver 840,000 bullets per minute into the air around them. The Americans called this tactic the Box of Death, a flying fortress in the truest sense. Back in Bremen, German radar operators detected the incoming formation at 0745 hours. Air raid sirens wailed across the city as civilians rushed to shelters. The Kammhuber Line, Germany's integrated air defense system, sprang into action. Luftwaffe ground controllers directed Müller's Schwarm and other fighter units toward the incoming threat. "Attention, all pilots," crackled the voice of the ground controller over the radio. Large formation of enemy bombers approaching from heading 270, altitude 25,000 feet. Estimated time to target, 25 minutes. All available fighters intercept immediately. Müller adjusted his course, climbing to 27,000 feet to gain the altitude advantage. Through breaks in the clouds, he caught his first glimpse of the American formation. Tiny specks in the distance, but growing larger. His heart raced with anticipation. "I see them," he radioed to his wingmen. "Remember your training. We attack from 12 o'clock high, fire a burst, then dive away. Do not linger in front of their guns." In his cockpit, Müller felt supremely confident. His Bf-109G-4 was armed with one 20mm MG-151 cannon firing through the propeller hub and two 13mm MG-131 machine guns mounted above the engine. This armament had proven effective against previous bomber encounters. What he didn't fully appreciate was the mathematics of the engagement he was about to enter. Inside Carolina Queen, the tension was palpable. The bomber had reached German airspace, and the P-47 escorts had reluctantly turned back toward England, their fuel reserves insufficient for the complete journey. Now the B-17s would have to rely on their defensive armament. In the radio operator's position, Technical Sergeant Raymond Johnson from Des Moines, Iowa, reported, "Bandits, 12 o'clock high. Multiple fighters incoming." Major Taylor's voice came over the interphone. "All gunners, report in." One by one, the defensive positions sounded off. "Top turret ready." This was Technical Sergeant Walter Hayes, the flight engineer. "Ball turret ready." Corporal Cohen's voice was steady despite his vulnerable position. "Left waist ready." Sergeant Donovan chambered around. "Right waist ready." Sergeant Wilson adjusted his flak vest. "Tail ready." Staff Sergeant Thomas Murphy, a former Boston police officer, had the critical position defending the bomber's rear. "Navigator gun ready." Lieutenant Frank Rodriguez manned the cheek gun position. "Bombardier gun ready." Lieutenant Paul Davidson controlled the chin turret's twin .50s. The men of Carolina Queen were about to put the flying fortress concept to its ultimate test. They represented America's technological answer to the agile German fighters, not through speed or maneuverability, but through overwhelming firepower. At precisely 0817 hours, Müller led his Schwarm into their attack dive. The four Messerschmitts plunged toward the lead formation of B-17s, their engines screaming as they accelerated to over 400 miles per hour. "Attack," Müller commanded. "Good hunting." The four German fighters streaked toward the bomber formation from 12 o'clock high, the preferred attack position, facing the relatively lighter forward armament of the B-17s. What Müller failed to anticipate was that the Americans had adapted their tactics. The lead bomber box had adjusted its formation to strengthen forward-facing firepower. As Müller closed to 800 yards, he lined up the lead bomber in his reflector sight. At 600 yards, he squeezed the trigger, sending 20 mm shells and 13 mm bullets streaking toward the American aircraft. He observed strikes on the bomber's left wing and fuselage. But then something unexpected happened. The sky before him erupted with tracer fire, not just from the lead bomber, but from 4 B-17s simultaneously. The American combat box had overlapped their fields of fire, creating a wall of .50 caliber bullets. In his post-mission report, Mueller would later write, "I had never seen such concentrated fire. It was as though I was flying into a solid wall of tracers." Inside Carolina Queen, Lieutenant Davidson controlled the Chin turret with cool precision. Banded at 12 o'clock. Engaging. The twin .50 caliber guns chattered, sending 150 rounds per minute toward the attacking fighter. Simultaneously, Lieutenant Rodriguez fired his cheek gun, while Technical Sergeant Hayes swiveled the top turret to track the approaching Messerschmitt. Mueller realized his error too late. His fighter shuddered as the first .50 caliber round struck the engine cowling. Warning lights flashed on his instrument panel. Still, he pressed the attack, determined to score a kill. The mathematics of the engagement were now working decisively against him. In the 10 seconds of his frontal attack, Mueller's aircraft faced approximately 600 rounds of .50 caliber fire from the combined guns of the bomber formation. Each M2 Browning could penetrate half-inch steel plate at 400 yards, and the German fighter's aluminum skin offered minimal protection. Lieutenant Schmidt, following Mueller into the attack, watched in horror as his leader's aircraft absorbed hit after hit. "Pull out, Herr Hauptmann," he shouted over the radio. "Break off the attack." But Mueller was committed. He fired another burst from his 20 mm cannon, seeing strikes on the B-17's fuselage. Then disaster struck. A .50 caliber round punctured his coolant system, while another shattered his canopy. A third round struck his oxygen regulator, sending the cockpit temperature plummeting as liquid oxygen sprayed into the confined space. At 25,000 feet, the temperature outside was already minus 40 degrees Celsius. The liquid oxygen, at minus 183 degrees, instantly froze everything it touched. Mueller screamed as droplets struck his exposed face and hands. Instinctively, he yanked the control stick, pulling out of his attack dive. His Messerschmitt, now trailing smoke and coolant, rolled inverted. In those critical seconds, the defensive fire from the bomber formation intensified. The ball turret gunner of Carolina Queen, Corporal Cohen, tracked the stricken fighter as it passed below. Fighter passing below. Cohen called over the interphone. "I've got him." His twin .50s hammered, sending another stream of bullets into the already damaged aircraft. In the waist positions, Sergeants Donovan and Wilson also brought their guns to bear as the fighter passed the bomber's midsection. Mueller's Messerschmitt was now effectively running a gauntlet of fire from multiple B-17s. American combat records later estimated that his aircraft absorbed over 1,000 .50 caliber hits in less than 30 seconds, an almost inconceivable amount of damage. In the final moments, Staff Sergeant Murphy in the tail position tracked the fighter as it fell away. "He's breaking up," Murphy reported. "Pieces falling off." At 24,000 feet, Mueller's fuel tank, punctured by multiple rounds, finally ignited. The Messerschmitt exploded in a bright orange fireball, scattering debris across the sky. The German pilot never had a chance to bail out. Lieutenant Schmidt, witnessing his leader's demise, immediately broke off his attack. "All aircraft abort," he ordered. "Disengage immediately." The 3 surviving German fighters veered away from the bomber formation, shocked by the intensity of the defensive fire. For them, the mythical reputation of the Flying Fortress had suddenly become very real. Inside Carolina Queen, the crew maintained professional detachment. Major Taylor's voice came over the interphone. "Good shooting, men. Stay alert. There will be more." Sergeant Donovan recorded in his personal diary that night, "We got one today. He came in from the front, probably thought we'd be easy pickings. The Kraut never knew what hit him. I counted at least 50 hits from my gun alone. When all our guns fired together, it looked like a solid wall of tracers. No fighter can survive that." The remaining flight to Bremen proceeded without further incident for Carolina Queen. The formation dropped 152,000 pounds of bombs on the submarine pins, causing significant damage. All 76 bombers returned to England that day, an unusually successful mission for that stage of the bombing campaign. Back at the Luftwaffe airfield, the 3 surviving pilots from Muller's swarm landed at 1,025 hours. The mood was somber as they reported their leader's loss. Lieutenant Schmidt, now the senior surviving pilot, faced the difficult task of debriefing the mission. "It was unlike anything I've seen before," Schmidt reported to Major Osa. "Their defensive fire was not like the scattered response we've experienced in the past. It was coordinated, concentrated. Hauptmann Muller's aircraft." His voice faltered. "It simply disintegrated." The loss of Muller, an experienced combat leader, was a significant blow to JG-1. But more concerning for the Luftwaffe leadership was what this engagement revealed about the changing nature of the air war. Colonel Hannes Trotloff, a senior fighter inspector visiting from Berlin, was present for the debriefing. In his report to Luftwaffe High Command, he wrote, "We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the aerial balance of power. The Americans are not winning through superior pilot skill or aircraft performance, but through overwhelming industrial capacity. Each B-17 carries more defensive armament than our fighters can withstand, and they arrive in formations of unprecedented size. We are no longer facing individual aircraft, but flying combat systems that operate as integrated units." Trotloff's assessment was accurate. By March 1943, American factories were producing B-17s at the rate of 300 per month. Boeing's plants in Seattle operated around the clock, employing over 30,000 workers, many of them women entering the industrial workforce for the first time. In contrast, Germany's entire fighter production for the same month was approximately 800 aircraft of all types. This disparity in production capacity would only widen as the war progressed. By 1944, American manufacturers would be producing over 400 B-17s per month, while Germany struggled to replace its mounting fighter losses. The human side of this industrial equation was equally stark. The United States Army Air Forces had established an elaborate training system that was producing 10,000 pilots annually. Each B-17 crew member received specialized training in his role, with gunners firing thousands of practice rounds before entering combat. In contrast, fuel shortages in Germany had forced the Luftwaffe to cut training hours for new pilots from 250 to less than 110. By late 1943, German fighter pilots were entering combat with barely enough training to take off and land safely, much less engage in complex aerial combat. The night after the Bremen raid, the crew of Carolina Queen gathered in their Nissen hut at Bassingbourn. The mission had been their 7th together, and they were beginning to develop the tight-knit camaraderie that characterized bomber crews. Corporal Cohen, the ball turret gunner who had fired some of the fatal shots at Muller's fighter, sat quietly on his bunk, writing a letter home. At 19, he was the youngest member of the crew and had celebrated his birthday just the week before. "What's eating you, Cohen?" Sergeant Donovan asked. "You got yourself a confirmed kill today. Should be celebrating." Cohen looked up from his letter. "I was just thinking about that German pilot. Wonder if he had a family." Major Taylor, overhearing the conversation, sat down beside his young gunner. "That's what separates us from them, Cohen. We can still see them as human beings. But remember, if he'd had his way, all 10 of us would be dead now." Cohen nodded. "I know, sir. Just feels strange to know I helped kill someone I never met." "Focus on getting through your 25 missions," Taylor advised. "Then you can go home and think about philosophy. Out here, it's just mathematics, our guns against theirs." The major's words reflected the brutal calculus of the air war. By 1943, both sides recognized that the conflict had evolved beyond individual heroics into a contest of industrial might and organizational efficiency. The American approach emphasized overwhelming firepower and standardized tactics, while the Luftwaffe increasingly relied on technological innovations and the shrinking pool of highly skilled veteran pilots. At Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin, analysts were growing concerned about the changing dynamics of the air war. A classified report prepared for Hermann Göring in April 1943 concluded, "American bomber formations present a qualitatively new challenge. Their defensive firepower exceeds anything previously encountered in aerial warfare. A B-17 formation effectively creates a mobile flak zone with firepower equivalent to 25 ground-based 20mm anti-aircraft positions. The report recommended new tactics and weapons to counter this threat, including air-to-air rockets, heavier cannons, and attacks from beyond the effective range of the American .50 caliber machine guns. But these technical solutions could not address the fundamental problem. America's industrial base was simply outproducing Germany's. The numbers told the story. By mid-1943, the 8th Air Force had 17 heavy bomber groups operating from England, with more arriving every month. Each group comprised 48 to 72 aircraft. By comparison, the entire Luftwaffe fighter force on the Western Front numbered fewer than 400 operational aircraft in the same period. Back in America, the industrial mobilization had reached breathtaking proportions. The Willow Run factory in Michigan, built by Ford specifically to produce B-24 Liberator bombers, covered 3.5 million square feet of floor space. By 1944, it was producing one complete bomber every hour, around the clock, 7 days a week. This production miracle was mirrored in the manufacture of the .50 caliber machine guns that had proved so lethal to Hauptmann Müller. Before the war, American factories produced approximately 350 of these weapons monthly. By 1943, monthly production exceeded 20,000 units. For the German pilots, this disparity created a psychological burden as heavy as the tactical challenges. Oberleutnant Adolf Galland, one of Germany's top fighter aces, later wrote, "We began to feel we were fighting not just against the Allied airmen, but against the entire American industrial complex. Each bomber we managed to shoot down was immediately replaced, while each of our losses represented an irreplaceable skilled pilot." The story of Hauptmann Müller's final flight embodied this fundamental imbalance. His Messerschmitt, representing the best of German fighter technology, had been overwhelmed not by superior American piloting or aircraft performance, but by the sheer volume of defensive fire that the bomber formation could generate. On May 12, 1943, less than 2 months after Müller's death, Major Taylor and the crew of Carolina Queen were shot down during a raid on St. Nazaire. The aircraft was hit by flak over the target and crashed into the Bay of Biscay. There were no survivors. The bomber was immediately replaced and a new crew assigned. The air war continued without pause. In the aftermath of the Bremen raid, Feldwebel Otto Wagner, the rookie pilot who had witnessed Müller's destruction, kept a personal diary that captured the changing morale among the Luftwaffe pilots. "Today I saw the future of this war, and it terrifies me. We are not fighting individual aircraft, but an entire nation's factories. Each American formation brings more firepower than our entire staffel can muster. Hauptmann Müller was our best pilot, and he vanished in seconds. What chance do the rest of us have?" Wagner's pessimistic assessment proved prescient. By February 1944, less than a year after Müller's death, the Luftwaffe would effectively lose the daytime air war over Germany. The introduction of long-range P-51 Mustang fighters, escorting bomber formations all the way to their targets and back, eliminated even the limited tactical advantages that German defenders had maintained. Yet for all the industrial might that America brought to the air war, the human cost remained staggering on both sides. By the end of hostilities in 1945, the 8th Air Force alone had lost 26,000 men killed in action, more than the entire U.S. Marine Corps fatalities in the Pacific. The Luftwaffe lost over 30,000 pilots, including nearly all those who had been serving when Hauptmann Müller made his final flight. In the summer of 1945, as American occupation forces cataloged the remnants of the Luftwaffe, they discovered a partial wreckage inventory that included items recovered from Müller's Messerschmitt. The report noted simply, "Aircraft completely destroyed by multiple high-caliber projectiles." Approximately 80% of recoverable fragments show ballistic damage consistent with .50 caliber impacts. Attached to the report was a small, charred leather notebook, Müller's pilot logbook. The final entry, dated March 17, 1943, read, "Tomorrow we face the Americans again. Their bombers grow more numerous, but they remain vulnerable to a determined attack. A good German pilot is worth 10 of their gunners." The events of March 18th had proven him catastrophically wrong. His confidence, born of early war successes against inferior opposition, had not prepared him for the industrial reality of American air power at its peak. In Bremen today, a small memorial at the City Museum includes a display of aircraft fragments recovered from the surrounding countryside. Among them is a twisted piece of aluminum with partial Luftwaffe markings, believed to be from Müller's Messerschmitt. Beside it, a simple placard reads, "Recovered 12 kilometers west of Bremen. March 1943." A reminder of the 160,000 Allied airmen and 55,000 Luftwaffe personnel who lost their lives in history's first strategic air war. The impact of the American bombing campaign extended far beyond the immediate military objectives. The citizens of Bremen, like those in other German industrial centers, endured increasing hardship as the air raids intensified. The shipyards and submarine pens that were the primary targets of the March 18th raid had been hardened with reinforced concrete bunkers up to 23 feet thick, making them nearly impervious to even the heaviest bombs available to the Allies in 1943. This meant that many bombs fell on the surrounding city instead, damaging civilian infrastructure and housing. Margaret Weber, a schoolteacher who kept a diary throughout the war, described the aftermath of the raid. The city center looks as though a giant has taken a hammer to it. Entire blocks are now just piles of rubble. The air still smells of smoke and dust 3 days later. Everyone walks in silence now. The human toll of the strategic bombing campaign would grow exponentially as the war progressed. By April 1945, Bremen had endured 173 air raids, with approximately 4,000 civilians killed and nearly 60% of the city's buildings destroyed. For the American airmen, the raid on Bremen represented just one mission in what would become an increasingly costly campaign. The 8th Air Force's initial optimism about precision daylight bombing gradually gave way to a more sober assessment of the realities of combat over Germany. Lieutenant Colonel Curtis LeMay, who would later rise to command the strategic bombing of Japan, reviewed mission reports including the encounter that claimed Hauptmann Müller's life. He remarked to his staff, "The mathematics of this war are brutal but inescapable. We're trading 10-man crews in 4-engine bombers for single-seat German fighters. As long as we can replace our losses faster than they can replace theirs, we will win the war of attrition." For the families of fallen airmen on both sides, these statistics provided little comfort. In April 1943, Müller's widow, Elsa, received official notification of her husband's death, along with his personal effects. Her response revealed the human dimension behind the strategic calculations. Klaus always said he was fighting for Germany's future. Now Germany must find its future without him, as I must find mine without my husband. In Charlotte, North Carolina, the parents of Major Taylor received a telegram in May 1943 after Carolina Queen failed to return from St. Nazaire. His father told the local newspaper, "My son knew the risks. He believed by flying those missions, he was helping to bring this terrible war to a quicker end." The air war over Europe represented a new kind of conflict, industrialized, anonymous, and fought at a scale that transformed individual courage and skill into mere variables in a larger equation of production capacity and technological advantage. Yet within this vast machinery of war, the human element remained. Men like Hauptmann Müller and Major Taylor made decisions, showed courage, and ultimately sacrificed their lives in service to their country's objectives. Perhaps the most profound legacy of encounters like the one over Bremen on March 18, 1943, was how they forced a reconsideration of warfare itself. The traditional virtues of the combat pilot, skill, daring, individual excellence, were being overshadowed by industrial might and organizational efficiency. This transformation would continue through the Cold War and into the modern era, where technology and economic capacity increasingly determine military outcomes. Dr. Heinrich Bartels, a Luftwaffe historian who interviewed surviving members of JG-1, summarized this shift. The death of Hauptmann Müller represented more than the loss of a pilot. It symbolized the moment when the Luftwaffe began to understand they were facing the full industrial potential of the United States. This realization came too late to save thousands of pilots who would follow Muller into increasingly hopeless combat. The story of Hauptmann Klaus Muller truly embodies a pivotal moment in the air war, when German tactical excellence and individual skill collided with American industrial might and came up wanting. His last flight marked the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force, not through any failure of German engineering or pilot training, but through the implacable mathematics of industrial production that would ultimately decide the war. The irony is that while Muller laughed at the lumbering American bombers, dismissing them as easy targets, he failed to grasp the fundamental transformation of aerial warfare they represented. The B-17s weren't just aircraft. They were flying manifestations of America's vast industrial capacity, each one carrying more firepower than an entire German infantry company. In the end, Muller's Messerschmitt didn't just absorb 1,000 bullets. It essentially absorbed the output of thousands of American factories, millions of American workers, and the full economic might of a nation mobilized for total war. Against such odds, even the finest German pilots stood little chance. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.